Hello, I'm David, your curly-haired host, and welcome back to another episode of Auspol Explained. Today we'll be talking about how there is no truth in political advertising laws.
Sort of.
So, every election, you turn on the TV or you watch YouTube and there's an ad, and it makes the most ridiculous claim. If you vote for Party X, the whole world will die. It's just going to implode and it'll be a disaster and it'll be the worst thing you could do. Vote for Party Y. Only Party Y will save Australia from certain destruction. And you're like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound true at all. Some things sound absolutely absurd and almost completely unbelievable. Almost like maybe outright lies. But you think to yourself, hang on, aren't there advertising standards? I mean, a company cannot just claim that if you eat enough of their product, it just cures malaria. Like just shoving sausages in and ta-da. So what are the laws regarding political advertising? Let's find out. You may be wondering, is there even a federal law regulating truth in political advertising? And the short answer is no. The long answer is the rest of this entire video. The thing is, currently, there is no legal requirement for the content of political advertising to be factually correct, according to ad standards, the body that regulates the advertising industry. Businesses must avoid misleading or deceptive conduct, or suffer civil sanctions from the ACCC, or Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. But for some reason, this just doesn't apply to politicians. 3 guesses who decided what kind of laws there should be on that. 3 guesses. In 1983, the Commonwealth Electoral Legislation Amendment Act created the first provision to do with false advertising. It stated that a person shall not, during the relevant period in relation to an election, print, publish, or distribute or cause, permit, or authorize to be printed, published, or distributed any electoral advertisement containing a statement that is 1. Is untrue, and 2. That is or is like to be misleading or deceptive. There was the legal defense that you could argue that if you made an untrue statement, you simply didn't know or couldn't be expected to have known. This act was then repealed 1 year later on the recommendation of the Commonwealth Parliament's Joint Select Committee on Electoral Reform. What a mouthful. They had the following criticisms. 1. Political advertising has intangibles, ideas, policies, and images that are difficult to test for truth. 2. Predictions or opinions could be presented as fact, and therefore the legislation was just too broad to be workable. 3. It would be unfair to publishers, which would be forced to seek legal advice before each publishing, greatly diminishing the amount of information available to the public. And 4. An injunction could be misused to disrupt the campaigns of competitors, and given that elections are very short, an injunction would effectively disrupt someone's attempts to put information out there for the duration of the entire campaign. The committee then concluded that the legislation was too broad to be workable, but if it was reduced in scope, it'd be ineffective. So it might as well just not exist. So now, all that's left is really defamation law, or the voters to be able to discern what is true and what isn't. The Constitution has an implied freedom of political expression, and so regulation of political advertising comes to the issue of that a political candidate must be able to express their beliefs no matter how misguided or reprehensible they may be. Because, well, freedom of speech, so long as those opinions aren't defamatory. Unless those opinions are attempted to be backed up with misleading facts or deceptions, then, well, you can't really regulate that. We could have truth in political advertising laws, and people would say, it's in my opinion that voting for Party A will destroy our country and ruin every social norm we have. And then also, I don't know, make turtles illegal, probably. So vote for Party B. See, social norms are intangible and you see the problem. There have been attempts to introduce similar legislation over the years, but all have failed. Queensland, for example, proposed to have truth in political advertising laws in 1995, but failed. In 1998, the then Liberal Prime Minister John Howard was against introducing truth in political advertising laws. He said that free speech was the best way to counteract false speech. In his words, the government firmly believes that political advertising should be truthful in its content. However, any legislation introduced to enforce this would be difficult to enforce. Voters, using whatever assistance they see fit from the media and other sources, remain the most appropriate arbiters of the world of political claims. A ReachTel poll in the 2016 election found that a majority, 87.7% of people, wanted tougher truth in political advertising laws. But wait, some places actually do have it. South Australia is the only state that has truth in political advertising laws, though they are narrow. Their legislation prohibits election advertisements from having inaccurate or misleading statements made by an authorised person who claims them to be fact. There can be fines for up to $25,000 for political parties that break these laws. Ads can also be fixed or dropped if the South Australian Electoral Commission deems that they need to be. This has actually had an effect. For example, the Liberal Party was found to have been made misleading claims that their energy plan would save households $300 a year during the 2018 state election. Labor was also told off for misleading claims. They said that the Liberals had a secret plan to cut $557 million of the GST share from South Australia. The Northern Territory also has a law saying that campaign material cannot be untrue or mislead a voter. So, good, right? Yay! 2 places in Australia have made it harder for politicians to lie. Even without truth laws, there are still limits to how far you can mislead voters. You just can't lie to a voter any way you want. There are some restrictions. You cannot distribute how to vote cards or electoral ads or notices, handbills, pamphlets, etc., containing incorrect or misleading statements that interfere with how someone could cast their vote. This is about lying to someone about how to physically fill in a ballot paper, not lying to someone that would affect the decision of who they vote for. So you can say, hey, Party A is going to give everyone $1 million if they win, but you can't tell someone to only mark one box on the House of Representatives ballot. You need to fill in every single box on the House of Representatives ballot. If you're really unsure how the process of voting works, either watch my first video, The Basics of Australian Government, or go to www.aec.gov.au. They will tell you everything you need to know about voting. Just remember, if you're confused about anything election related, the AEC is your friend. There aren't always punishments though. In the 2019 election, the Liberal Party displayed signs in Chinese that it had deliberately made to appear as if they were from the Australian Electoral Commission. The signs said that the correct way to vote was to put the Liberal Party first, and then number the rest of the boxes. How to vote cards say the same thing, but they are clearly identified as to which party they are from. This naturally was criticised as an attempt to manipulate the migrant vote. The AEC was just unable to act on these signs. In 2019, the AEC found 87 cases of unlawful political advertising, none of which it has taken punitive action on. The AEC has only taken an individual to court for an injunction for breaches of electoral law once. In most cases, it just gives a warning to the party and then they take to turn down the offending material. This is faster than taking someone to court, but it does have the issue that, once you have made a misleading statement and get asked to remove it, then it's already been said and people have already been tricked by it, especially if you display it on election day, like the Liberals did. There are laws about what can and cannot be authorised during an election, and then, for example, there are always ways that it can be ignored. For example, in 2019, fake counter vote cards were handed out aimed at Greens voters, telling them to preference Liberal member Peter Dutton. which is a dirty tactic to play on people's ignorance. But the AEC found that this didn't actually breach electoral requirements because it didn't purport to be an official how to vote card, and it didn't say that it was issued by an official political party, which is super dodgy and bad. You shouldn't be able to do that. You may also remember from the 2019 election the false claim that Labor was going to introduce a 40% death tax. That was a straight up hoax that was eventually repeated by the coalition. It was just a blatant lie that made its way around social media. Even though Labor asked Facebook to take down the false advertising. The Liberals also made a video of Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen saying the words death tax over and over again to associate them with the words, even though it was just taken out of context. The context was actually them denying that such a thing would ever happen. So, despite the lack of source on this, the clear denial, no policy reference to it whatsoever, and no reason to do such an unpopular thing, it persisted, and many people fell for the hoax. You may also remember a lot of claims that Labor was going to introduce or increase a bunch of taxes, which was a false and misleading claim from the Liberals. Their policies, if you actually spent ages reading them like I did, they were actually about ending legal loopholes that benefited the rich and had bigger proposed tax cuts for lower income earners than the Liberal tax cuts. This is a very important example as to why it matters to do your research before going into an election. Please spend time reading about the different political parties and their policies before every election, and pay attention to what they're actually proposing as opposed to what their opponents say that they're doing. Research can be good for you. I know that it keeps me alive. I need to do it, or I die. This is all compounded by how social media is very, very difficult to regulate. It's basically impossible to enforce things on the internet. As you probably are aware, fake social media accounts can just spring out of nowhere. People can post pretty much anything they want, and it doesn't need to be authorized by the AEC. Suddenly, you have got misinformation everywhere. There are laws, though, that prohibit political advertising for 48 hours before the day of an election, though these only apply to radio and television because those laws are very old and outdated, so social media is just a free-for-all. So just when you're sick and tired of the endless onslaught of political advertising on TV, you are then suddenly inundated with even more aggressive last-minute ads on social media. There also isn't a limit to the amount that a political party can spend on advertising. So that's how we get people like Clive Palmer, who spent around $60 million on advertising, which was more than Liberal, Labor and the Greens combined in 2019. That's why there were so many billboards. Text messages also aren't restricted. Political parties can buy mobile numbers from marketing databases and send you texts that you didn't ask for. Clive Palmer's United Australia Party sent about 1 to 2 million text messages during the 2019 campaign. Political advertising also doesn't fall under the Do Not Call register, so there isn't actually an official way to stop them except for just manually blocking the number on your phone. Political robocalls are also exempt from the Spam Act of 2003, which applies to commercial messages instead. So they can just simply buy your personal information, contact you, and then lie to you as much as they want and can afford to do so until it becomes defamation. Some regulations do exist, though don't be too downhearted. The AEC regulates political advertising under the Commonwealth Electoral Act and ensures that it's clear who authorised what. This allows voters to know exactly who made what statements. The AEC doesn't fact-check this material beforehand. This also means that there is informal campaigning. This is basically anything said by your family, your friends, or just strangers on the street with like a real issue with one particular political party. That's not regulated because it's not official party advertising. That's just political opinion. The Federation of Australian Commercial TV Stations, or FACS, used to hear complaints about misleading political advertising, but now they only make sure that it is authorised and not defamatory. The industry body is now called Free TV Australia, which probably sounds a bit more familiar. So there you have it. Yay! Politicians can lie. I mean, you already knew they could lie, but now you can back it up with facts. So basically, there have been attempts to create truth in political advertising laws in the past that have just failed. It's just difficult, I guess, and also probably unwanted by some parties. Potentially, South Australia's laws could become a model for future legislation. Until then, please do plenty of research to make sure that a political party is telling the truth or not. Don't worry, when an election comes round, I will have a summary of all the different parties and all their election promises. Well, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can learn. Also, comment down below what you would like to learn about next. As always, there is a Patreon in the description so you can support free educational content for everyone. And in the description, there is a link to the copy of the script, so you can read further information and all the citations I have provided, or use them as resources in an assignment. You're welcome, and I will see you again.